From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. Later tonight, why is Satanism on the increase? We'll find out. Here's what's happening. Police and protesters clashed outside the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. last night during a demonstration for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas, the latest reflection of boiling tensions all over the planet over the bloody conflict. Amid an ongoing shortage of an RSV immunization for young children, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has announced that more than 77,000 additional doses will be distributed immediately. These doses will be going to doctors' offices and hospitals through the CDC's Vaccines for Children program and commercial channels. Cutting 1 teaspoon of salt from your diet every day can lower your top blood pressure reading just as much as a typical hypertension medication, even if you don't have high blood pressure, a new study found. Christian Wild from myheartbook.com is with us. Just 1 teaspoon a day, that's it?
Yeah, that's what they're telling us, George, And the reason this topic is so important is because 70% of Americans may suffer high blood pressure during their lifetimes. And herein lies the reason that the medical profession has always told us that high blood pressure is the silent killer. And stress levels, like in today's crazy world, are not making things any easier. Now, George, you and I don't have medical degrees, but I think we have somehow, through the years, claimed degrees in common sense.
That's right.
I think it's safe to say, George, that with today's economy and the high prices for everything, many families looking to cut their monthly living expenses are choosing to not refill their prescribed blood pressure medications and may possibly be putting themselves and their families at additional risk for stroke, for heart attacks, heart and kidney failure. Now, having a home blood pressure monitor or using a free one at your local pharmacy may be a plus to help you stay ahead of what's really going on. So let's see if today's topic may help lower the risk and save lives.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, all the articles, George, and advice I have read on today's article can be overwhelming and very difficult for families to follow. However, the award-winning DASH diet from a few years ago, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension, which is an expert-approved method of lowering salt intake, has a simple premise. They say eat more veggies, fruits, low-fat dairy foods, limit foods high in saturated fat, and limit your sodium intake to 2,300 milligrams a day. And, George, that is exactly the number that was put on this recent study that we read about today. And so anyway, here, this may be a win-win situation and not too difficult for any of us to follow.
Track Christian's work, myheartbook.com. Thank you, Christian. Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Randall with us with his weekly UFO report. Hello, Kevin. What do you have for us this week?
Hi, George. How you doing?
Wonderful, sir.
Well, I've been reading a book that addresses some of the scientific issues in the UFO research. One of the complaints is the lack of direct evidence in the public arena and the inability to reproduce results in the lab. There is an area that does cover both these points, and one that sometimes is overlooked by the scientific community and the military investigators. I have talked in the past about the electromagnetic effects created by a close approach of the UFO. These are the stalling of car engines, the interference with radio and television broadcasts, and animal reactions to the EM fields. The Condon Committee dismissed these reports because of a rather nearsighted approach and the Air Force directives under which they operated. They thought that they had missed an opportunity to do some real scientific investigation because there were effects that could be measured, and there were residual effects from the introduction of the massive EM fields. They did propose a way to measure these effects if a car engine had been stalled. The theory was that the magnetic signature of the car's metal would be altered, and if compared to other similar cars built at the same time in the same plant, that alteration might be demonstrated. No one has ever really followed up on this because it would be costly, time-consuming, and difficult to execute. But there is another way to do it, and that is look at the results of cell phone failures when attempting to film or photograph UFO sightings. This is something I've noticed after I was asked why we didn't have good cell phone photos of UFOs, and part of the reason was because of the failure of those phones. The question then becomes, would these failures leave detectable traces on the phone? Would the magnetic field generated by the close approach of the UFO be enough to alter the electronics of the phone? And as far as I know, no one has attempted to make such an investigation or examination, and frankly, I think it's outside the expertise of most of UFO investigators. I find more of these cases now, and have reported on some of them in the past. More recently, on November 2nd of this year, the witness, who wishes to remain anonymous, said that he was sitting in the backyard watching the clouds over Wichita, Kansas. Overhead, he saw a round, possibly disc-shaped object flying in and out of those clouds. The witness was familiar with many kinds of aircraft, given the aviation industries in the area. He said the object made no noise, and he estimated it was about 20 to 25 feet in diameter. It had a metallic appearance that reflected the sunlight. He reached over and picked up the cell phone, and he tried to film correct. When he couldn't get the phone to work, he attempted to take photographs. That failed as well. Once the UFO was gone, disappearing into the clouds, the cell phone began to operate normally. This idea of EM effects is one of the theories behind Fran Ridge's MADAR network. It is linking UFO sightings to responses in the MADAR detectors. And on November 3rd of just last year, the witness was driving near Stoutsville, Ohio, when the sky lit up and a bright round object appeared. In keeping with the cell phone trouble, the witness attempted to take pictures but said the camera was black. The sighting took place near MADAR site number 144 in Farmington Hills. There was a noted spike in the magnetometer at the time of the sighting. There was a corresponding swing in the compass as well. Here again is a sighting that could provide indirect evidence of the UFO. Unfortunately, the contact information is inaccurate, so additional investigation is impossible at this time, and that's what we have for tonight, George.
All right, my friend, we'll talk to you next week after, not Thanksgiving night, as a matter of fact. How about that? In a moment, a former U.S. Border Patrol agent joins us to talk about the situation along our borders, particularly Mexico. His book is called Borderline. Vincent Vargas is with us next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Vincent Vargas was born and raised in Los Angeles. After 4 years of active duty in the United States Army, serving 3 combat deployments with the 2nd Battalion of the elite 75th Ranger Regiment, he joined the U.S. Army Reserves. He served in the Middle East, where he continues now to serve as a drill sergeant. In 2009, he became a federal agent with the Department of Homeland Security and served as a medic with the Special Operations Group. He is a successful entrepreneur, actor, writer, producer, currently stars on the hit FX show Mayans 7 MC, and he's also a motivational speaker who focuses on leadership, military transitioning, and motivating youth. His work is called Borderline, Defending the Home Front. Vince, welcome to the program, and thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you for having me.
How have you been?
Good. This book release has been pretty wild.
It sure is. Are you along the border now?
No, I actually just drove. I just drove 2 hours north just to make sure I could make this call.
Well, we're glad we got you with us. So we're going to have a very important subject matter. I want to get your thoughts. You were in the military all these years. Does it seem like we're getting more and more involved in the situation in the Middle East? Yeah,
the situation is definitely a little uncomfortable to watch. I'm nervous that we're going to start definitely deploying more people out there in support, and it's going to get us pulled into something. So I'm watching closely.
I mean, we just got out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and it looks like we're going back in the Middle East again in a big way.
Yeah, I know. It's a little scary.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. How many Border Patrol agents do we have? About 21,000? Is that an accurate figure?
The last number that I got, it was about a few weeks ago, was somewhere around the 19,000. We've had a lot of Border Patrol agents do early retirement or transition into new career fields outside of the Border Patrol.
Based on your experience, what should that number be?
It would be nice to see that around the 30,000, 40,000.
I mean, they're flooding from Mexico, some coming in from Canada, but Mexico's the bad spot, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's correct.
2,000 miles of border, and how do you stop that, Vince?
We just have to implement more of the technology and other items we use to deter, right? So currently, it's not so much the fact that we're not able to stop them all. I think the biggest challenges we're facing is the policies that are put into place after the fact that we apprehend individuals.
Oh, that's probably true. I'm all for legal immigration. I think it's great that people want a better life for themselves, for their families, and they come into the United States legally. I know my family did in the 1920s, and I believe your grandmother was an immigrant as well, wasn't she?
That is correct, sir.
And who could blame her for wanting to come here?
Yes, sir. The land of opportunity.
Absolutely. But it's the illegals. So what's the ratio, do you think, Vince, to legal immigration versus illegal immigration?
Well, last year I think the number was somewhere around 1.5 million were entered into the country legally. And I think some of the numbers that we have now, just rough numbers are some of the 5 million to 8 million have come in illegally or have entered into the country illegally and then processed and still released into America. And so there's a big discrepancy there.
And, and I live in the Los Angeles area part-time, and I see a lot of Hispanic workers who can barely speak English, but they are the hardest working people, Vince, I think I've ever seen. I mean, they're there sweating, they're in the heat, but they're all working, and they're working hard to make a living. And you got to feel for these folks.
Oh, absolutely. I think, when someone reads the book, they're going to see there's always an empathetic view about this, and there has to be. There's two things happening at once. There is the Homeland Security issue that we have to always be concerned about after 9/11, and then there's the immigration issue. And the humanitarian issue that happens daily with immigration is people seeking asylum, right? And sometimes it makes sense, and we have to do our part as Americans to assist in that. And then the other times it's better if they would just do the process of entering legally, and they'd be afforded more opportunities.
Vincent, how serious is the problem of sleeper cells sneaking into the country through Mexico?
I think that's been a topic of discussion for a very long time. Ever since 9/11 itself is really what brought a lot of attention to it. There is no doubt individuals who are entering this country or attempting to enter this country through the southern border. We have apprehended somewhere close to 200 individuals that were on the terrorist watch list, and those are just the ones that we've apprehended, been able to identify. There is a realistic threat that people are getting past, and the number, I believe, roughly was around 2 million gotaways. And those are individuals that are documented as we did not even catch them. They got away just through the events of how difficult it is sometimes through the border. And, just imagine what's the percent of those individuals being a small percent, even a small percent is still a threat entering this country and hoping to do harm to our country.
And in terms of where they may be coming from, what's your best guess on some of them? Is it most of them just Mexicans, or are they coming from China and the Middle East and all over the place?
We have from all over the place, but, you have the Mexicans coming across. They come over often, but the point is because of how close it is to our nation, right? It's the bordering nation. But the biggest concern that we have is we call them exotics. It's kind of how they're identified through doing paperwork. Countries like China, countries like Afghanistan, Africa, so on and so forth. All these countries that we can see that there has been a history of these outliers who want to do harm to America through extremist ideologies. And so, there's a concern. It's happening more often. and we have to really find a way to deter that kind of traffic coming from our southern border.
That you can repeat on the radio. What do you Border Patrol agents talk about when you see all this influx of immigrants who are coming through illegally?
It's a challenge. It's a little bit of a frustration knowing that our hands are tied. They're out there doing the job. They are apprehending every individual as possible. Nothing has changed from the Border Patrol standpoint. What happens is the challenges that happen after you process them, after we bring them into the station and do our processing. After that point, it's out of our hands, and that becomes a total policy implementation. And since currently right now there's very little, repercussions for entering illegally, we've almost incentivized this situation.
How creative, Vince, are they in trying to get across the border?
It's when you say they, it's really like these drug trafficking and human trafficking organizations. They really understand this cat and mouse game. They know how to distract. They know how to overwhelm. They know how to create tunnels and do things in a way where it's hard to find. And so this has been going on for many, many years. If we want to talk about a secure border and what a secure border looks like, I think there will never be a time in our history where nobody ever gets across, because they will always find a way to go over, under, or through. And so that's the challenge. We're dealing with humans who have thought and who can kind of be deceiving, and they have found ways of beating our system. And we're going to continue to implement new technology to try and continue to help. So it's definitely going to always be a challenge.
Has any administration done any kind of serious job in trying to stop this?
Yeah, when people talk about administrations, just the truth be told, Obama administration did a very good job at the time. It was very strict policies. They were apprehending individuals, and they were going to serve jail time, and so did the Trump administration. And so through history, every administration tends to make their decisions on how they want to manage this border crisis. Currently, the situation, it's a little dire, right? It's a little challenging because after the border agents have done their job and ICE has done their job, essentially it's out of our hands on what happens. And currently we've seen what happens because there feels to be very little or no repercussions. It's become, identified throughout the southern countries, and now we have a massive influx of immigration.
How many illegals come in with kids?
It's hard to say. Back when I was serving down in the Del Rio sector from 2009 to 2013 or so, it was often. We had a lot of family units, and, that hasn't changed so much. Instead of more recently, you do see a massive influx of, males of the age of from 18 to 45 or so. Some call them military age males, but you could also identify those are the age range of males who are often the workers. And so it's definitely, it shifts and fluctuates, it seems like, every year.
And in terms of those that come through legally, how long does that process take for somebody?
That could be the biggest challenge. Sometimes I've seen from 5 years all the way to 12 years.
Wow.
And if you want to really address this and try and find ways of kind of fixing a system, we have to find a way to streamline that process for those individuals who are coming here who bring value to this country from specific jobs or working classes. But anyone that decides to go through the legal process, we should really have some kind of streamlined process to make it easier, because if not, you could identify now, you can come over here illegally and essentially get into the country within 4 days. Now,
when the illegals come into the country, what do they do? Where do they go? How do they live?
It's hard to say exactly the process of what they do, but, we identify a sponsor source or a sponsor family that they can identify. They give us an address, and that's what we put on their paperwork. But ICE and non-government organizations, they help them get to their families or families or friends. And from that point, they just kind of live into America. They try and make it, they try and find work. They try and, seek shelter. And it's been pretty interesting to watch. I think it's overwhelming a lot of the states and their resources and figuring out how to manage them in a humanitarian mission or a humanitarian way. And it's been a challenge. I think we've seen some of the news on some of these cities, sanctuary cities that opened up their doors, and then now they're in a they're considering a state of emergency. And so this is something that we're going to be dealing with for the near future. It's something that I don't think anyone has answers for. I would say some do get to work, and some find themselves having trouble even finding work at this time.
All right, Vince, we're going to take a short break and come back with more on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with Vincent Vargas. We're talking about his work called Borderline, Defending the Home Front. What are the countries that these immigrants originate from, the illegals, Vince? What are they doing to try to stop this, if anything?
Yeah, I don't think any of those countries are really trying to stop anything at the moment.
They probably enjoy their people just flocking out of their country.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Do you miss being a Border Patrol agent?
I do. It was a great career field. I was part of a search, trauma, and rescue unit, and it was rewarding work to be able to rescue lives that are struggling out there in the desert, whether it be immigrants or our own Americans who might have found themselves in a bad place.
Now, with the border we're talking about for Mexico, about 2,000 miles long, how have we spaced out these 21,000 Border Patrol agents?
Every sector is slightly different, just depending on the terrain of it. What we have is, we mentioned earlier the 19,000 to 20,000 Border Patrol agents, and so we have three different shifts going on. You have a morning, a swing shift, and a night shift. So that alone tells you, we're pretty thin everywhere.
With the kind of technology we have today, can we tell instantly if somebody's come over the border?
That's only if they're within the area of the technology. And so, we kind of have a robust system, and if it's all working together, it works really well. And that's things like seismic meters and cameras, as well as our wall and strategically placed, Border Patrol agents. That's kind of how we're able to manage the traffic, that's pretty much desolate and deep into some of these areas. But right now what's happening is you actually just have a massive influx just walking up to Border Patrol agents and willing to get apprehended. They just want to get caught because they know the process after they're caught is easier access to America.
Yeah, explain the process. I was just going to ask you that. Once they're caught, what do we do with them?
Yeah, so once a Border Patrol agent apprehends anyone who enters the country illegally, and identifying that at first as anywhere outside of a port of entry if they've just tried to enter to America, we take them to a processing center. And in most cases, just a Border Patrol station has a processing space, and we identify, their information. We get their fingerprints, their home of record. We identify them, who they are, where they're coming from, and once we've done that, we identify, what their case is. And so, if someone comes over here saying they're seeking asylum, that's not the Border Patrol's job to identify whether that is true or false. What we do is just create the packet of exactly what the situation is and what they're telling us, and from there, once they're processed, we house them for a few hours until ICE can show up, and we hand them off to ICE. And what ICE does is they determine their housing, whether they're going to be housed in a detention center or they're going to be given an NTA, which is a notice to appear, to see a immigration judge who will make a determination of their case after the fact. It's been proven that only about 3% currently are even returning to these dates. And so it's a very challenging situation right now. And
how many are returned back to their original country?
Well, it just depends currently. If you're from Mexico and you're a male who is apprehended, they usually get returned back to Mexico because it is just so close and kind of our relationship with Mexico. If you're a family, currently a family unit coming from Mexico, that's then usually there's a different system for that because whatever their situation may be. Right now I'm hearing in some areas they're still giving notice to appear to some of the Mexican nationals who enter illegally.
Have any of the illegals come through with weapons?
It happens, but not often. I think, the intention of most of these coming illegally, they know our process. They know our system. They know that they're able to beat and circumvent the system, and so they don't want any challenges. They just walk right up and kind of give up right in front of you. If they were to bring weapons, that would hold up a whole different situation. And, their intentions, and I'm not saying all of their intentions, I'm saying just the majority they know the system and they're going to abuse it.
And the border agents are armed anyway, aren't they?
Yes, sir. Every Border Patrol agent is armed. When you go through the academy, you learn your firearms and and you use other than lethal items as well. So we have all the training and everything, all the capabilities if needed.
Tell us about this episode at the Rio Grande that you tried to save somebody. What happened?
It's different episodes, so there's one time I did and one time I didn't, and there's many different times we've all attempted. When someone's crossing the Rio Grande River, most of the time they don't know, one, the challenges of crossing that river. Some areas are shallow up to your ankles, and some areas are above your head, and it's hard to determine that just by face value of the river. And so some people enter into the river without knowing what's going to happen, and some don't know how to swim. And so there's times where us as Border Patrol agents, we have to make a determination of where we're willing to risk our lives to rescue these individuals without determining if they're good or bad people. Our job is sometimes to safeguard human life. And so, I've been a part of that, but every Border Patrol agent has to make that choice.
You tried to rescue somebody and it was unsuccessful, and you'll never forget that case, will you?
Yes, sir. No, I'll never be able to forget that face. I saw his face before he lowered himself before he was pulled under the water, the face of fear that he had, and I couldn't get to him in time.
Gosh. How wide is the Rio Grande?
It changes. It fluctuates from could be only about 7 feet all the way up to, I'm imagining somewhere around 50 to 75 feet at times. The river just kind of weaves in and out through the Mexican border and the American border, and there's some areas where it takes a hard left and a hard right, and it goes right back onto the borderline. And so it really is a very interesting river that changes throughout state to state and border to border and Border Patrol sectors.
Vincent, would a 2,000-mile wall work and prevent people from coming in?
Yeah, the wall itself was never meant to be something to stop people from coming in per se. The goal of the wall is to funnel traffic in a way where agents and also migrants can be pushed away from these very challenging areas to monitor. The wall is part of the system, part of the robust system we have, to include the cameras and the seismometers and strategically located Border Patrol agents. But the wall is a huge help. It's a huge asset. It's part of our, force multiplier. It makes 20,000 agents boots on ground be able to cover, 2,000 miles. And so it is something that is needed, and it supports the mission.
Is the border along Canada secure?
I would say no. It's the same as we have down south. Currently there is a bigger influx attempting to cross through the Canada-American border, but it's not as prevalent as the southern border. The southern border, you have these outliers, these human trafficking organizations or trafficking organizations who have kind of created a science to what they do, right, this big cat and mouse game. And so you're going to continue to have more people use the southern border because it's just been proven to work.
Now, when you say human trafficking, are they literally charging illegals in Mexico, let's say, to come into the United States, and they basically do the job to get them in here?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's almost like they get paid for the attempt, not for the actual success of it. So, these organizations have established themselves almost like a travel agency over there, where you pay them a certain amount of money and they're going to show you the path to get into America. Sometimes they could be creating diversions for drugs and other things, or they do help them get across illegally. We have heard time and time again how challenging that is, but as well as how dangerous that can be. The manipulation goes deep. It's a business for them. Those are monetary value. They're using these people, some of these innocent people genuinely in crisis. They're using them as pawns in a chess game.
Do government officials who are responsible for this deal with the Border Patrol agents and ask for their advice?
I can't say yes or no to that. I do feel like there is a disconnect between the Border Patrol agents, boots on ground, to policymakers up in D.C., right? I do feel like there's a disconnect in communication, that they don't see the challenges that we're facing daily, as well as the kind of loophole that has kind of been established in current policy.
I'll always remember a guy who had a restaurant in the St. Louis area. He built a bar, Vince, and didn't talk to any bartenders. So he built it himself, and everything was wrong. Everything was backward. Everything that a bartender could use to make his job more comfortable, quick, and efficient, they didn't have. And I always wondered, why didn't the guy just talk to the people who were doing the actual work? Like Border Patrol agents, talk to them.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of the goal of writing this book. I think that you can get this book into the right hands. There's going to be some insight in there that policymakers can actually use. This book was 100% fully intended to educate those who really don't understand the complexities of being a Border Patrol agent, but as well as our borders.
How long did it take you to write this book, Borderline?
I'm a writer, so it took me 6 months. Not that long.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. You enjoy doing your television work?
I do enjoy it. It's something that is very exhilarating and fun. It's an interesting way to make a career. But, we're storytellers, and my goal, just what I believe in life, of God, family, and country, I feel like we can use our powers as writers, as storytellers, to hopefully inspire, motivate, and entertain.
What's one of the most bizarre stories of somebody trying to get into the country that you guys come across?
There's some interesting stuff that happens with, these families who come over here illegally but then have kids here. Or bring their little kids. Those little kids sometimes don't know that they're illegal, and until they become adults, and maybe they go down to Mexico to visit family, and they realize they can't come back because they don't have papers. I've had an individual come across illegally, and he was trying to explain it. He got apprehended, and he was trying to explain. He goes, "Man, I didn't even know I was illegal. I was just scared. I crossed the border illegally." And, that guy, for now, his life will forever be changed. He's going to be getting sent back to a country he doesn't even know. And so it's really interesting, some of these holes in our current system that, you don't hear about too often. But there's people that are getting sent back to countries that they've never even lived in those countries since they were a baby, and they don't even know anything about those countries or even the language sometimes. There's some fascinating stuff that happens often, from human trafficking stuff to drug busts. I mean, the corruption in drugs alone is fascinating. Sometimes it could be so corrupt that they're able to manipulate a Border Patrol agent to make the greatest mistake of their life. And no one is, I guess, everyone is human, and you see these mistakes happen all the time.
If they gave you a blank check, Vince, and said, "Fix this," what would you do?
Very complex question. There is no 1 + 1 = 2 answer for this. And, I see this more like a 7-layer cake, and you have to have all the right recipes, and anything too much or too little can really destroy the whole cake. And so in saying that, there has to be education going down south. We have to teach South American countries what's going on and what is the legal process for entering this country. I believe they're being manipulated by these trafficking organizations, and they are being abused the whole time. And so if we can educate down south of how to do the process the right way, if we can, potentially help some of these countries find out why their citizens are leaving their country, rushing to ours. How can we make theirs a more livable situation, and so that we can, maintain ours? On top of that, we have to identify better systems in our policies that are going to actually deter people from entering this country illegally. We want people to be afraid of breaking the law. And if we don't make them afraid of breaking the law, well, then what's going to stop them from breaking the law? On top of that, there's going to be other things like the story I was just mentioning, DACA, kids that are born here. Where do we cut that line off? When do we stop allowing someone to break the law and then also reap the benefits of becoming American? So there's a lot of complex questions that need to be answered, and we have to address every one of those almost in layers. We have to find a way to maintain more Border Patrol agents. We have to build our recruiting for agents, and we have to help them with their technology. There's more technology that can be done. There's more things we can do to really have a secure border and be able to identify anyone who comes across at any moment. And, that it all starts from the top down, or you can start from the bottom up.
What percent of the illegals, Vince, come in through these traffickers?
Oh, I would say close to the 90 percentiles have some kind of coyote is what's called. It's like a trafficker who helps them get across.
That's huge. That's huge.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's very many that sit there and say, I'm going to attempt to cross on my own. They all look for guidance. They all look for someone to kind of guide them through it, and it's all tied into the cartel.
And once they're into this country, because they've come in a somewhat organized way, are they provided with a place to stay? And do they know where they're headed?
Yeah, most of the time, anyone coming across knows where they're headed. They have an idea of where they want to go. They probably have family of some sort who's already made the journey and already has given them some information or intel. And so they usually have a plan. The problem is sometimes the trafficking organizations will hold them for more money or more ransom, if you will. Once they get into America, then it's like, well, if you want to get to there, you're going to have to pay us more. And so it's a very sneaky game they play.
It's almost like what the mob does to businesses in their areas. Pay to play, right?
Exactly.
The name of the book is Borderline: Defending the Home Front with Vincent Vargas. It is available at Amazon.com. And has it hit bookstores too, Vince?
It has, yes. You can find it at Barnes & Noble and local bookstores as well.
Great. We're going to come back in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM and take phone calls with him about the incredible story about defending our home front, the illegal immigration situation in this country.